All right, guys, welcome to week 4. We're going to talk about compliance within NCAA athletic departments and a little bit about Title IX, which falls under that umbrella. So, as far as NCAA, and really, guys, this goes with NAIA also, each institution has to apply the rules and regulations that govern the NCAA, that govern the conferences. A lot of that is dictated by the NCAA and the NAIA, and they have a process in place that allows people to self-report when they make a mistake, and there are honest mistakes, guys. Understand that. The NAIA in particular is based completely on self-reporting. As far as the NCAA goes, they have a manual that's about 450 pages that covers everything from how institutional control works to the rules to amateurism to eligibility. And that's the responsibility of not only the coaches but administrators to know this stuff and to understand how to apply those rules. So every university has a compliance officer or a compliance department. It depends on the size of the institution. Some of these things are huge. I mean, they have these huge numbers of people working there just in order to be able to keep up with everything that's going on. And these people are often the most valuable people in an institution, but they're also sometimes the most resented and almost hated because they do help make the institution accountable. And their responsibility is to protect the university. As far as NAIA goes, most places have somebody who is a director of compliance or has some type of eligibility type title. As far as Reinhardt goes, it's Jeffrey Portier and myself handle most of our eligibility and compliance stuff along with Coach Pop. So rules education, guys, is a huge part. It's fundamental. People have to know the rules. They're less likely to break them if they know them. So at the NCAA level, you can't be out recruiting or coaching without having passed the rules test, and it's a little harder than you think. Student athletes have to participate in workshops. If you follow enough compliance departments on Twitter, particularly a good one to look at is Ole Miss. They frequently put out things so coaches are aware of changes in rules, and it has to go beyond the university. You have to make sure that prominent boosters understand the rules. The people that you deal with outside of the university understand the rules because they can also get the university in trouble. So it's important that, as future people working in sports, that we understand the rules, particularly in college athletics. If we go into working, that we educate not only our student athletes but also everybody involved in our program. So recruiting is where you see this issue happen the most often. And those of you who follow college athletics, guys, it's a huge deal. And if anybody who's recruiting has to have passed the NCAA bylaws, and they have to be certified as a recruiter. And every single league or level of the NCAA has a different way of going about doing this. And a lot of it has to do with understanding when you're allowed to be able to talk to somebody. It's crazy how this stuff works. And I understand why people make mistakes at the NCAA level because there are so many rules as far as when you're allowed to talk to people. So you have contact, which is basically, face-to-face or with your parents. And contact can occur off campus. It can be at practice. It can be at a game. You have a contact period. This is when a coach is allowed to have in-person contact with the student or their parents. You have a dead period where you can't have any in-person contact. You can ride and telephone, but you can't have anything to do with them in person. You have an evaluation period where The coach can evaluate the academic and athletic ability by visiting a high school or watching practice. You have evaluation periods, which is a set of time where you can visit the school, but you can't have in-person conversations. You have official visits, which is where the campus pays for the parents and the student to come to campus. They can pay for transportation to and from, rooms and meals, and reasonable entertainment. And you have a quiet period where you can't have in-person contact with anybody. You have official visits, you have unofficial visits, you have verbal commitments, and all this stuff coaches have to understand. And this is where a lot of people get themselves into a bind, just because they don't understand what it means to visit, have a visit, official visit. It gets complicated. So when you do make a mistake, you end up with violations and infractions. Secondary violations are kind of innocent mistakes. Most of these are self-reported, and you can self-impose your penalties. If you have repeated violations, it can become more major. And you have an infractions committee that is responsible for basically assessing penalties against an institution or against people who break NCAA rules. And then you have two main compliance resources within the NCAA. You have the Legislative Services Database, which will provide you all the information about the bylaws. And you have a compliance assistant, which allows you to keep your detailed records. Your assignment that this week that we'll talk about in a little while is going to have you look at this Legislative Services Database. Switching gears a little bit, Title IX, kind of falls into compliance a little bit. And, Title IX is a landmark decision, 1972, that prohibited discrimination on the basis of sex in any educational activity. And understand that involves anything that gets federal money. It was mandatory in 78. It's been revised in 94 and 96 to provide a little bit more guidance for how to enforce it. But it looks at three areas of compliance. It has a participation part of it where it has the three-prong test. This is the part where you probably are most familiar or that you hear the most about. Prong one is proportionality, which is basically you have to have participation opportunities in athletics that are proportionate to your undergrad enrollment. So if 55% of your undergrad enrollment is female, then 55% of the athletic opportunities have to be for females. You have program expansion, which is where you have to show a continued expansion opportunities for underrepresented sex. So you have to show where you have added teams, where you've increased the number of participants on teams. And then the third prong is accommodation of interest and abilities, which basically you have to demonstrate, full and effective accommodation of the interest and abilities of the underrepresented sex. So this prong is often overlooked, guys. It's kind of hard to understand, but basically, here are some ways you can kind of look at it. You can, show that you have improved facilities, that you have improved, treatment with having access to trainers, to having nice uniforms, to having, better medical care. All this stuff kind of falls into this. And because it is kind of fuzzy, this is one that people don't use as much. They usually fall on the proportionality test as a way of being in certification with Title IX. As far as scholarships go, you've got to demonstrate that the percentage of students athletes base aid is proportionate within 1% to the total student population. So if an institution is 60% male, then males can basically receive between 59 to 61% of scholarships. You can't be out of proportion, or you can't be out of whack with that. Other kind of benefits, you have to keep maintenance and equipment and supplies the same. You have to have the same amount of travel opportunities and allowances in there. You have to have the same number of and compensation for coaches and academic support, and then the locker rooms and practice facilities have to be comparable. So I posted a lot of information for you this week, guys, under the resources tab. A lot of history of Title IX. So I encourage you to look at that.